Hello everyone! Welcome to this video. I am going to be sharing books that have made me cry. There is a long list, and I actually have a shelf on Goodreads that I think it's called Made Me Cry or something about crying. Look up the cry shelf. So at some point tears were shed in all of those books. So what I decided to do is just focus on fiction first of all, and then kind of talk about typical things that do make me cry in books, and then some books for examples. The number one thing that makes me cry is anything to do with God's grace in a person's life. And if some kind of story can portray that, and then if the character can have a moment where they get that revelation, usually I will cry at that moment, depending on how it's written. The classic example is anything by Francine, and I was trying to think of which one has made me cry the hardest. I have them right here. I was kind of looking through them, so they're kind of messed up. These are all the ones that I've read. Oh, and The Lady's Mind as well. So I was looking at these, and I really think the book that I cried the hardest in was And the Shofar Blue. I kind of thought it's between this book and Redeeming Love, but I cried so hard in this book. I can't recommend this book enough. This is a brilliant story, but it's also heartbreaking because basically it's about a pastor and his wife who start out at a new little church, but the pastor, his dad is a mega church pastor, and so he grew up knowing what makes a church mega, and he wanted to turn this little church into a mega church, and he succeeds. And you start from the beginning and you watch that happen and how his marriage falls apart because of it, and then the types of people that are attracted to his church. I cried so much in it because she really explored so many different types of people that call themselves Christian and go to church, and everywhere to totally faking it to so sincere, they would give up anything for Jesus kind of thing, and everyone in between. And I just resonated so much with these people and just the different things that they said and did, and how Francine wrote God into the story. I just was crying so much during this book. It just really spoke to me. And so stories like this make me cry a lot, just because faith and my faith in Jesus matters so much to me. Books that talk about it really get me right in the heart. So this is one example. The other example though is God's grace. So that's kind of where Redeeming Love would come in, because Angel experiences God's grace in such so many different ways, and his intervention in her life, I have felt like I needed his intervention. And when he does come and meet you exactly in your darkest moments, there's nothing like it. And so seeing it in a book, just I can relate to it really well, and yeah, I cry. So those are the biggest things that make me cry. So, and it's for a really good reason. I usually have a moment with God after, and God speaks to me through books like this so much, and I love it. And that's why Christian fiction like this is my favorite. I could read it forever. It is emotionally taxing a little bit, but yeah. Okay, I will say similarly, The Testament also has such a beautiful redemption story. I also love redemption stories, and that's why I love this book so much, because it was a sneaky redemption story, basically, for this lawyer who's has a task and a mission, and he's trying to figure it out, but he also is very broken inside, and God meets him and redeems him, and he accepts Jesus in the end, and it's the most beautiful thing ever. So books like this also make me cry, and I love it. Okay, the next thing that makes me cry is anytime the power of God overcomes a problem or an enemy or a danger, and he like just intervenes and is like just so on your side and protects you from stuff. And I would say the entire Mark of the Lion trilogy is that. Like, it shows how if you surrender to God and live for him, you will be okay. Even if it looks like you're not. Like, this book, the first one, like, I don't know if I could do it. Each of these books has a different part of God's power on display that just, I'm so in awe of it. And it makes me emotional thinking that that's the God that I serve and that I believe in. And I love it. Okay, next, power of prayer. I love it. Because it's very connected to God's power. Like, our prayers are powerful because of who we're praying to. And classic. Like, oh boy, did I cry at so many different times. I have a whole reading blog for this book. Would highly recommend watching it. I do go into details, so if you haven't read it, maybe don't watch it. But the pastor walked into an arcade and just like whispered to himself, "Oh Lord, save these kids." And every demon in that room trembled when he said, "Lord, save these kids." And just the authority that we have with prayer, that we just don't know, we don't see it. But books that can give me a glimpse of what it looks like, I need it. I need to be reminded, because I love praying, but sometimes it's hard to feel like no one's listening, but it's not true. Jesus is always listening. So this book, yeah. And then similar to this book is The Delusion. Oh, yeah, I cried. Mostly actually because of the way the author distinguished Christians from non-Christians. She used light. What I really cried about was there was this teenage girl, when the main character could see the spiritual world, he could see a light in her stomach and he realized that she was pregnant. And I just thought about like how that baby in her, even though it's so small, like it already has God's protection. And I just cried at that. I was just like, oh, I love it. So yeah, those books make me cry too. Okay, straight up, I cried so many times at this book because anything to do with what God thinks of me, I cry. Because his thoughts are so kind and loving, and they're way better than we think they are. And this book just gave me so much language for what God could be saying to me and how he could feel about me. And I needed it. I had never considered it before, and I cried a lot. Okay, last thing I'm going to talk about is anything to do with like a family relationship that is tough, but one of them loves the other really well, and the other one is so hurt that they can't love you back. But then throughout the story, if that one person who does love continues loving and is constant in it, and then usually at the end of the story, there's a beautiful reconciliation. Love it. Between a child and a parent or siblings, those are the main two that I see. But yeah, this is a daughter-father, father-daughter dynamic, and it's the father loving the daughter so beautifully, and the daughter resisting it and being angry, and then slowly her heart softens. And then just like kind of everything that happens around everything with how their relationship comes to an end. I cried so hard. And yeah, so all those kind of things make me cry, and those are all books that I did cry during. And my level of cry can be different. Like, there'll be times when I just like, tears get into my eyes, but nothing falls. But there are times when I have to close the book and just cry and have like a moment with God and just like pray, because my heart is so touched by whatever I just read. And I love stories like that. I wouldn't say like, oh, I love to cry. I like look for books that make me cry, because it's not about sadness. Like, I don't like sad stories for the sake of sad stories so that I can cry. I cry when, I mean, I just explained it. Like, you know, the deeper life stuff that is like, oh, you know? And sometimes there's sadness in it, but it's not an inherently sad story is why I'm crying, you know? Like, there has to be hope. I need hope in any story that I read. I don't like bleak stories that end with no hope. So yeah, that is that. I would love to hear your guys's experience with crying in books. Do you cry in books? Why do you think you do or don't? And what, if you do cry in books, what book made you cry the hardest? I would love to hear. And yeah, maybe I'll get some recommendations from you guys. And that is everything. Thank you for watching, you guys. I hope that you enjoyed. Have a great day. Number one thing. What did I just say?